This is the first lesson in Module 10, Lesson 10-1, which is all about statistics, or the whole module is, but the first lesson is statistical questions. So it's just mostly kind of an introduction type of lesson here that's going to get you ready to complete the rest of the 7 lessons that we have throughout this module. So let's get started. Statistical questions. Statistics involves collecting, organizing, and interpreting pieces of information or data. One way to collect data is by asking statistical questions. A statistical question is a question that is answered by collecting data. Answers to a statistical question will vary based on the data collected. So basically, if you're asking a statistical question, then you're going to be able to answer that by collecting data. Or if you are collecting data in order to answer a question, you might be or probably are answering a statistical question. So here are some examples of different types of questions. On the left, we have statistical questions, and on the right, we have not statistical questions. So let's look at the difference here. Statistical questions examples are like this. How many text messages do middle school students typically send each day? How many hours per night does a typical teenager spend watching television? So in order to answer either of these two questions, we would need to collect some information in order to see what the answer is. And so we would probably need to survey several middle school students to see some kind of average or collection of data about how many text messages they send each day. Or similarly, we would need to survey teenagers in order to see how many hours per night they spend watching television. We can't just answer this based off of one person usually, and you could look it up because this type of information has maybe already been collected. But in the event that it's something that we don't know the answer to yet, then you could answer these by collecting data. On the other hand, non-statistical questions would be something like, what is the height in feet of the tallest mountain in Colorado? Or how many people attended last night's jazz concert? Now, this first one, the height in feet of the tallest mountain, it's obvious why it's not statistical. This is just a fact. The answer to this is going to be someone went and measured the height of the mountain, and we know how tall it is, and that is something that you just find out. Technically, you're still collecting a piece of information when you do that measurement, but it's like there's a one right answer sort of situation here, and so it is not statistical. This one, the jazz concert one, feels like you might be collecting data because you're collecting like the number of people as they walk in the door, maybe. But again, there is still only one exact right answer here, and so it's not statistical because it just has like it is what it is. It happened already. It's not going to change because the concert's over. So yeah. So down here they kind of said that in fewer words. They said in the table the questions on the left are statistical questions because if you were to survey a group of students you would likely get a variety of responses. The questions on the right are not statistical because each question has one specific response. So it's more about what kind of answer you get when you answer this than not. All right, so constructing statistical questions is an important part of the process of using statistics to collect, organize, and interpret data. You will learn how to apply these steps in order to help answer a statistical question. So here are those steps. Step 1, construct the question. Step 2, use that question to collect data. So depending on what your question's asking is going to determine how you collect your data. Once you have your data, step 3 is to summarize the data using tables or graphical displays, which we'll get into as we get farther into this module. And then step 4, use the data to answer the statistical question. So you have the question, you collect the data, then you need to kind of analyze the data, summarize it using tables and whatnot. And then once you have summarized the data, you are able to then answer your question based on the data. Okay. Okay. So actually, let's talk about this. So I said that how many people attended last night's jazz concert is not a statistical question because it just has one right answer. But how could you rewrite that question so it is statistical? Well, you could either make some kind of like poll about who would come again, or like maybe there's jazz concerts once a week, and it could be something like which night of the week has the most people coming to the jazz night concert or something like that. Let's look at an example for identifying statistical questions in a minute. All right. Determine whether or not each question is a statistical question. Move through the slides, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so I'm going to move through the slides. You're going to just follow along on your page. So we've got how many states are there in the United States? This is not a statistical question because it is just, we know there's an answer to that. There's 50 states. Okay, next. Oh, I just said that. Okay, how many states has the typical middle school student visited? So like you would have to survey people to figure this out. So that is going to be a statistical question. You could group some students, some middle school students specifically, and survey them, and you'll likely get a variety of responses, meaning like some have been to 30 states, some have been to 5, some have only been to the one that they live in, and so you're going to get a big spread of information there. All right, how many states okay, I can't read. In how many states has the typical adult in your neighborhood lived? Well, that sounds statistical as well, because if you survey people, you will likely get a variety of responses. In what year did Alaska become a state? That is not statistical. That is something that is going to be a fact. It became a state in 1959, in case you were curious. All right, so that's going to bring us to the check. You have some questions to answer. Please identify whether or not each question is statistical or not. You do not need to explain how you know. There's not enough space. All right, and then once we have our statistical questions and the data that goes with them, we can display this data in a table. So we're going to also look at that in this lesson. So a survey is one way to collect data and answer a statistical question. Once the data are collected, data is plural, by the way, because it's more than one piece of information, you can record the results in an organized way, such as a table, and then analyze the results. So let's suppose a random group of adults were asked the question, how many hours do you exercise each week? The results are shown in the table. So here's the question at the top. And then we've got number of hours and number of responses. So this is, they responded 0, 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, 4 hour. Okay. And then this is how many people answered for each one. So one person says they don't exercise at all. 2 people said they exercise 1 hour a week. 5 people said they exercise 2 hours a week. 5 people said they exercise 3 times a week, and so on. So based on the results in the table, one observation you could make is that more than half of the people who responded exercised fewer than 4 hours per week. So like all these big numbers, 5s down here are underneath 4. So there's lots of different observations you can make about this table. So what are some other observations you can make about the data in the table? The same number of adults exercise 2 and 3 hours a week. You can say you could say most people exercise at least 1 hour a week, something like that. So let's look at example 2. You're going to need to fill in this table yourself as we go here. So suppose you want to answer the statistical question, how many hours per week does the typical 6th grade math student study? You survey students in your math class using the question, and then the responses were 2, 4, 5, 4, 2, 1, 3, 1, 1, 4, 6, 3, 5, 2, 2, 1, 1, and 4 hours. So like just each person gave their own number of hours. Organize the data in the table and then analyze the results. So here are our responses here. We're pretending that you asked all your classmates and this is what they said. So here's how we're going to complete this table. For number of hours 1, we're going to come over here and find all the ones. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people said they study 1 hour per week. And then how about 2 hours? 1, 2, 3, 4 people said that they study 2 hours per week. 3 has 2. 4 has 4. 5 has 2. I'm kind of counting super fast here. Hopefully, I'm counting correctly. And 6 only has 1. So you need to fill in that. Did I do it right? Okay, great. So once you have that filled out in your table, you can find the total number of students surveyed, and this is going to help us analyze the results. So what we are adding up here are the number of responses column. So we've got 5, 4, 2, 4, 2, 1, and we're adding those up. And then what is that? 9, 10, 11, 15, 16, 17, 18, right? I don't know. All right. So you have 18 people in your class, supposedly. And then you can summarize the data from here. So right now we were just organizing it and then we were analyzing a little, and now we can study the responses to determine if there is an overall trend. One statement you can make is that more than, exactly, or less than half of the students who responded studied fewer than 3 hours per week. So fewer than 3 hours per week is going to be 1 and 2 hours. That's going to be 5 plus 4, which is 9, which happens to be exactly half of the students because we have 18. So we're just practicing analyzing the data here. We're going to get more into it eventually. But for now, I want you to just try it yourself. Fill in this table, make a selection, and we'll deal with the rest in class.